I'm Jasper Henderson. I've been tutoring with Signet for, I think about 4 years now. It might be 5 years, but I really enjoy working for this business. I know that you guys have been attending these series of webinars and getting all sorts of materials from them. And I just am very pleased with the professionalism and also the quality of clients that I get to work with through there. So I am actually based in Los Angeles right now. So hence I'm wearing short sleeves. It's very hot today and I don't have AC in my office. So it's 3:30 here. I guess it's 6:30 where you are. We will keep this definitely to an hour long, and we will cover all sorts of things about writing the great college essay. Since I started at Signet, I've been coaching these college essays, and I've also helped people beyond Signet. I find the college essay to be actually a really interesting task for students to undertake. Especially, we don't actually write personal essays very much as high schoolers, as grade schoolers, and so this is actually I think a really great chance for you guys to explore your story, tell it, and also hopefully make a good impression on colleges, and that will help with your acceptance. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. I am a writer, as I think you should distrust any writing tutor who is not actually a writer or in some kind of field that requires writing. I write a lot of essays, short stories, and poetry. I am a poetry teacher some of the time. I've actually done some poetry tutoring, which has been very fun, kind of coming up with lessons for students interested in poetry, coming up with poems to read together to talk about. I also teach in grade school and high school classrooms, teach poetry lessons. So I just love words, and I recently got my Master of Fine Arts in creative writing. So that's where I'm coming from, is as somebody who loves words. But I know that not everybody loves writing, and I think that everybody can love writing this essay because I think it's a universal thing that we all like writing, like talking about ourselves, telling our stories. So let's see, it's 6:35 East Coast time. I'm going to share my screen and we will launch into this presentation that I have prepared for you guys. This talk is called Write Your Perfect College Essay. And let's jump into it. The first thing for you to note is that you should not be intimidated. I think that this is maybe the most important thing as you're starting out on this essay. Don't be scared of the college essay. This is your story. You're the only person who can write this essay. And however well you write it, that is as well as it could have been written. So don't be intimidated by this essay. If you leave yourself enough time and you let yourself think about it, you will do a great job. And it's important to note that it's really not about your grades, your scores, your activities. So this kind of sits aside from the rest of your college applications. In the rest of your college application, you are talking about, you're trying to describe as best you can things that you've already done. You're trying to describe your grades, you're trying to describe your activities, you're including references from teachers. Those things you can't change at the last minute. At this point, those are set in stone. But this essay, you can work on now, and that can make a difference between whether it's a great essay or whether it's not so great an essay. But by the end of this talk, I hope you guys have the tools to really create a great essay. And this third bullet here, I've tried to remove as many bullets from this presentation as I can, but there are still many in here. The third bullet says you already have your stories that you tell. This one's just more intentional. And I think that this is really true. When we go home to our parents at the end of a school day, we say, hey, Mom, you wouldn't believe what happened at school, and blah, 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 blah. And that is an essay. That is something that you're telling. The same is true of when you write a letter to a friend or a text, or if you guys use Instagram stories. These are all ways that we tell our own stories. So this is just a slightly more formal way of doing this. And just a note as we're progressing along, I realize that when I'm sharing the screen, I actually can't see the chat, I don't believe. So if you guys have something to say, to jump in here, please do, but you just unmute yourself and blurt it out. So, okay, I'm going to press along to our second slide, which is as we approach this essay, I want you guys to start with a concept of what you're trying to do with this essay. We'll look at the specific prompts and we'll look at a process that I suggest that you follow. But first of all, I want you guys to think about this essay because it's a little bit different than, it's obviously different than a letter that you might write to a friend, but it's also different than an essay that you would write for a teacher. Because an essay that you write for a teacher, what you're trying to accomplish with it is to get a good grade on that essay, to really explore something, hopefully. But when you're writing one of these admissions essays, you're trying to present part of yourself that won't be shown elsewhere on your application. So this is really the place on your application where you can talk about your passion, your purpose, your values. You can talk about why you did the things that you did. Your activities list will show all of these different parts of yourself that may be very important, but it's this essay that can weave some of that into a story. So you really want to give a sense of yourself, and this separates it. It makes it a true personal essay, but it separates it from a more academic essay you might write. I also think that it's just important that you show to admissions officers in this essay that you're not a robot. And I mean, obviously there aren't actual robots applying for college yet, probably 5 years away from that. But a lot of people applied to college and don't give any sense of their own humanity, of the beating heart that is behind the test scores. So that's a little tongue-in-cheek, but as long as you show that you're a real person who has diverse interests, who's interesting in some way, you pass that test. And the last is, you want this to be a good piece of writing. And that's not only because it will communicate the first two things better, but it's also because it will show the strength of your mind. And I really believe that when we write, writing is really a way of thinking, a way of processing our own ideas. And so as you write your essay, you will be demonstrating to the college that you're somebody who can think deeply about things. So those are really your objectives, to round out your application, your test scores, and everything else, to show that you're not a robot and to show the strength of your mind. Now, I wanted to just spend a minute or two looking at this question: what is the Common App essay? So in short, it's an essay that hopefully you guys have all heard of. That is, there's a thing called the Common, I think it's called the Common App Consortium, that comes together and they make this application. And when I was applying to college, it was in its infancy and wasn't used by very many colleges. Now, almost all colleges expect that you write a personal essay according to the Common App essay prompts. Now, these prompts are so wide and so open-ended that almost any essay that you write, as long as it's vaguely about yourself, could fit into these prompts. But it's good to look at them and to just begin thinking about them, and we'll look a little bit closer at them. So the first prompt is about a background, identity, interest, or talent. So sharing some part of yourself that wouldn't make it onto your essay, or wouldn't make it into your application otherwise. The second prompt says, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? So with this prompt and with the next couple that we look at, I think you'll see that they're asking you to tell them a story, to tell why it really matters to you, and to give an idea of how it changed you, what it's suggesting for the future. So let's look at this third prompt. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? So again, they're asking you to tell a story from your life. They're asking why it's important to you, and they're asking what changed? How did the story progress? And it goes on with several more that are I think follow in the same vein. And then number 6 allows you to take it in kind of a different direction. Describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So this one asks you to talk about your own intellectual passions. And that can be an interesting place to go. I recommend playing with this prompt. The last one is very open-ended. It says, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So ultimately, this is the Common App saying, do whatever you want. It's okay. We will accept it. So the Common App is here really to help you, because they could have just started with prompt 7, but instead they included these other prompts. And I want to look closely at prompts 2 through 5. So here in that cool zooming in way. I think you can see from my beautiful typesetting here that that I see in each of these prompts, it says something happened. Now these can be different things that happened: a problem, a challenge, setback, or failure, questioning a belief or an idea, or it could be an accomplishment, an event, or a realization. And then each time they ask you, how did this affect you personally? What did it matter to you? And this is, you can miss this. And a lot of the essays that I've seen where I've said, okay, I think we need to maybe rethink this on a more elemental level. They miss this part. How does it matter to you? So it could be you're writing about a big problem in video games and creating video games. I don't know. I'm not an expert on video games. But if you miss the part of saying why you care about this, why it matters to you, why this is so interesting to you, then you'll be missing a major part of this story and why it could potentially matter to an admissions officer who's finally going to read your essay. And then there's a third part of all of these prompts, and that is the part where it asks you how you changed, what was different after this story took place. So what did you learn from the experience? What was the outcome? How did you identify a solution? What was this new understanding that you had? And all of these are great questions to ask at the end of a personal essay. And I think if you look at personal essays, if you read them, I love personal essays, I read a lot of them. They all, almost, there are some exceptions, they end up describing a change or a realization or a deepening. So this is my breakdown of these kind of essential questions of the Common App. And I recommend that you think a lot if you can come up with some of these things that happened, something happened. And if you can if you maybe have a story like that you could turn into a personal essay. Okay, I'm going to press ahead to the next slide. We're going to zoom back a little bit and talk about process. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do after not panicking is you want to plan your attack. A last minute all-nighter will not cut it. I have worked with many students who call up Signet sometimes on December 28th, sometimes on, there's often November 15th deadlines. They'll be calling up on, November 13th, and they're saying, hey, can we just work 4, 5, 6 hours a day and finish these essays? And, sometimes heaven and earth can be moved, but it is not the best way to approach this essay. So I know that you guys being here, here in June, you're already thinking about it and you're getting a head start on it. So, but encourage your friends not to wait till the last minute. I think it really is a great idea to sit down with a calendar and start thinking realistically about how long something takes and about when you'll have free time. I know for a lot of people, their senior fall is a very full time. So if you can not necessarily finish it, but get a lot done during the summer, you'll be in good shape. And it's a good idea to know yourself as you make this plan. So some people work slow and steady. Some people only produce their work when they have a big deadline ahead of them. I'm one of those people. I prepared this presentation about a week ago, so I was kind of ahead of schedule. But that was because I asked to have a deadline, and I had somebody review it at that point. So think about deadlines. Think about how you can keep yourself accountable. Over the summer, that may mean asking a parent or a friend to remind you, hey, it's July 1st. I was expecting you to have that first draft done. So set up a system that will hold you accountable. And set up a timeline. And your timeline could include some of these things. So this is my plan. This is how I approach this essay. And this is how I approach most of my own essays that I write. And it's a little bit different than everybody has their own way of going through this. The main difference is from the most standard way is that I have this thing called exploratory writing, which is step 2 here. And I think of it as somewhere between brainstorming and actually writing a full draft of your essay. But I think that spending a lot of time in the stage of figuring out exactly what your story is pays a lot of dividends down the road. So we're going to go through all of these steps. That's the bulk of this talk. But you can start with some brainstorming, exploratory writing, drafting your thesis and your outline, writing a long first draft. I suggest you go over the word limit, then you can pare it back, figure out what the core is, rewrite sections that aren't working, revise for clarity and flow, bringing in outside people to read and give you edits, but only people you trust, making further revisions, and then final proofreading, which is something a step you don't want to skip. Okay, we're going to launch into brainstorming. I've always thought the word brainstorm is funny. There's only one other, I think, compound noun with brain, and that's brain fart. But this is brainstorm. I don't know why I brought that up. Sorry. So brainstorming, I see, it's good to sit down with a pen, a pencil, and actually write stuff out and just like barf all your ideas onto the paper. But for me, at least, that's not how I generate most of my ideas. That doesn't mean that I don't brainstorm. I brainstorm while I'm doing the dishes. I don't have a dishwasher, so I spend like half my life doing the dishes, especially during pandemic. And I have a good idea, and I dry my hands on the towel, and I write it down in my phone. And I don't know about you guys. I keep my phone on me all the time. It's kind of creepy. I hope Apple isn't listening to everything that I do, but think of this brainstorm as an ongoing attempt to capture all the good ideas you have. And just whenever you have a good idea, woo, capture it, pin it down. And so that's how you start your brainstorm. create a long file in a notes application. It could be a Google Doc, and just add all your ideas, and then start sifting through that. At the start, I would recommend coming up with ideas for different stories. Oh, there was that one time that my friend said that really mean thing to my other friend, and I intervened. Oh, that could be a good story. Oh, there was that one time. That's kind of how stories start for me, at least with personal essays. Oh, there was that time. For me, I've been writing this very long essay. Oh, there was that time in college where that thing happened, and that was messed up. I should explore that. So once you have those ideas, some will stick out to you as better ideas. And that's where you start picking out your favorites. Okay, I think I'd like to explore this idea. And then I suggest that your brainstorms become a little bit more granular. So you can start coming up with scenes. Oh, well, what would I need to tell this story? Oh, I shouldn't leave out that thing my grandma said to me years before that really, if she hadn't said that, none of this would have happened. And also just like details. Some of these things will only come into your mind once. And if you don't pin it down, write it down on your phone, you're gonna miss it. So that's my brainstorming process. But I think that you guys should also do some active brainstorming. So active brainstorming is brainstorming exercises. Here I've finally escaped from the bullet points. So this is just one brainstorming exercise that I think can be very generative. And that is, you take out a piece of paper and you write at the top of it a bunch of roles that you play in your life. Daughter, best friend. When I was in high school, I was part of a program called Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So I would go hang out with like a 10-year-old who had a bunch of problems, and I would just listen to him and be his buddy. Write down all these roles in your life. Maybe you are a volunteer at the local soup kitchen. And then under each role, brainstorm a couple events or objects that exemplify or like signify that to you. And then just go from there. So these exercises can be useful. And I think the next slide, yeah, make the Common App prompts work for you. So we just looked at all of these Common App prompts, and they're there for you. They're written to help elicit like the best essay that they can, and also to help guide you along the way. And so I recommend using those as starting points for brainstorms. Just take one prompt and think, gosh, what story could I tell that would fit this? Even if it wasn't the best story. At the same time, I think one of the problems I see students having is that they will look at those Common App prompts and they'll become married to one. They'll say, this is the prompt that I'm gonna answer, for sure. Oftentimes it's like prompt number 1, what is like a background or hobby or interest that you must tell us about? And they'll say, I must tell them about my Rubik's Cube solving. So that is, I think, a little bit of a peril to become married to one prompt. You can be excited about a prompt, but don't give up on the other ones. So do some brainstorms around various answers to different prompts. And also, by the same measure, one prompt may give you an idea for a story, and then you'll be like, but it doesn't actually perfectly fit. Like, it wasn't really a realization. It was more like, I just had to move after that, or something like that. And so don't worry about it perfectly fitting the prompt. But as you're in the brainstorm stage, this is when those Common App prompts will be most valuable to you. Okay. So we are now going to leave the brainstorm stage. I think we're pretty much on schedule. We're going to move to this exploratory writing, which as a writing tutor, it took me a long time to figure out that this was a really valuable stage for students who are starting to write their essays. So during exploratory writing, we take ideas that we have, like, oh, I might want to write about this. And we write usually about a paragraph about each of them. So not like the whole idea for the essay, but more like we'll write a paragraph about a scene. We'll write a paragraph about exploring what it meant to you. We'll write a paragraph about what happened. And so during this stage, it's not a time to become super self-critical of your writing, super obsessed with getting everything perfect on the page. You're trying to find things. You're exploring. And so I think this can be really fun. It also, because we're not trying to generate brilliance at this stage, it really isn't something that should slow you down. But it's something you have to start early enough that you can sort of wander in your ideas. So explore all your good ideas. Why not? For me, there might be 2 or 3 ideas for an essay, and within each of those, there are like 2 or 3 scenes. So I'll just go in and explore them. It's useful to remember what the difference between a scene and exposition is. These are kind of creative writing terminologies that are more or less useful, but I think it's important to remember that in a scene, something happens in a place. So scenes take place, they have a setting, and they have action. And if you don't have either of those, what you're writing isn't a scene, it's probably like a mood. Sort of, I remember a student was once writing about band practice, or like being part of a marching band. It was like a drum line. And they really evoked the setting, this plays, the sound of everybody kind of warming up their instruments. But nothing actually happened in this scene. They just were like kind of warming up their instruments. And I pushed them on it, and they were like, oh yeah, well, after that, we do like actually march out to the field where we then do these performances. And they recovered some detail about that marching out. So it was like, even just that moment of the person saying, all right, now let's march, was exciting enough to make it, I think, a scene. At the same time, not everything that we want to write about is in scene format. Sometimes we need to write about the backstory. That's kind of a summary. How you felt, that's interior. Or what it meant, like why this is important for you to write about it. So also write some exposition. I would separate these out as different paragraphs, but this will help you to figure out where the heart of your story is, where the energy is, like what you're excited to talk about. So my suggestion is, as you're writing this, if you notice something, oh my gosh, I just filled up a whole sheet of paper. I just wrote 3 pages in Google Docs on this. That is a good suggestion that there's some heat there. There's a story there, and you can tell it. You probably could tell it for 2,000 words. The Common App is only 650 words. So this will give you a good sense of where the heat is, and you should always go towards the heat. I'm going to pause for 1 second, take a sip of water. If anybody has a question, please pipe up. Okay. If you wrote it in the chat, I'm sorry, I'm still new to Zoom, so I can't see the chat right now. All right, onward. After you have found out where the heat is, that is time to write your working thesis. So this is where you decide what the story is going to be about. I think that it's useful to distill this down to 1 sentence. I'm going to write about X. A lot of times we think of a thesis as something that has to be included in our essay. And I agree that it can be useful to have a thesis statement, sort of a restatement of why you're doing this, often at the end of the first paragraph, maybe at the beginning of the second paragraph. That said, this is not the thesis from your essay. This is a working thesis that will guide you. You could put this at the top of your entire draft as you start drafting, and it would say, I'm writing about this, and maybe it could include because. I'm writing about the time that I spilled milk all over my mom's laptop, because that was when I really started taking responsibility for my actions, but also learned self-forgiveness. Having this working thesis will make your life easier. And you definitely will keep revising it as you write your essay. You don't want to become married to it at this point. Just like you're not married to the prompt, you're not married to this working thesis. It's all a work in progress, and it's only as useful as in as much as it helps you write this essay. So always feel free to change these things. All right, once you have your working thesis, you are ready to come up with an outline. This will probably be guided by your exploratory writing. You will know what the scenes are, what you need to include. This is a good opportunity to think about the shape of your essay. I have here a classic approach, which is to start with a scene, then go into a more reflective state. What did it mean? How did it change me? Is that the shape that you want to tell the story in? Or do you want to end with a scene? That also can be very powerful. So an outline, you guys have made these before, but you generally write down like a sentence or a few words about what each paragraph is about. And usually the last paragraph is some kind of conclusion. Once you have this outline, it is time to write your first draft. This is a super exciting moment. It also, to me, is one that often fills me with a little bit of dread. And the only way that I can get through that dread is to remember, it's not my final draft. I don't have to hit submit as soon as I'm done with my first draft. So this is just trying to get some stuff out there to work with. So I recommend do not worry about the word limit here. The word limit is 650 words. When I'm working with students, guiding them through this process, coaching them along the way, I tend to say, let's aim for 1,000 words here on this long first draft. That said, you don't have to do that, but I think it's a lot easier to cut back than what if you end up with a 450 word essay? Then you're gonna like try and come up with some stuff, some extra stuff to shoehorn in there to make it longer. You can submit an essay shorter than the word limit, and that's not necessarily bad, but as a rule, you should aim for something around the word limit in your final draft. Okay, so in this draft, don't worry too much about transitions between sections. That is something that you can work on in your rewriting, in your polishing. So also don't become too wed to your outline. If it seems like it's not being your ally, that's fine. You can go off-road a little bit. And yeah, this is not your perfect draft. This is your first draft. The important thing is that after writing your first draft, you have a first draft, which will lead us to our next step. But this does not need to be the final polished thing. In fact, it should not be. So your first draft is there. Time to do a reverse outline. So this is something that I never did as a high schooler, as a college student. And I learned about it right when I started doing tutoring, because it was like, I needed a way to reach students, and I talked to other tutors, and they told me, oh yeah, you should do reverse outlines. And I wish I'd known about this long ago, because a reverse outline is an outline that isn't based around what you think you should write. That's the outline that you wrote the first time. This is an outline that describes what you did write. So to create a reverse outline, you'll want to take your draft. You can print it out, or you can do it on Google Docs. And next to, or just before each paragraph, write a short summary, 1 sentence, less than 1 sentence, saying what the paragraph is about. The story about my mom. Thinking about how bad it felt to hear those words. How I decided to start a new club at my school. You know, just like a brief outline. And then you go back and you turn it into a little outline without all of the writing in between. And then you can look at this in comparison to your original outline to see kind of how you did. But you can also use it to kind of think like, well, that's not actually that logical. And oftentimes for me, it will reveal, wow, there's something down here at the bottom that I should just move up towards near the top. So This is a good way to check in on the overall flow of your draft, because we can't always keep in our heads the progression in the way that our essay works as a whole. This is a way to step back and see your essay as a whole. So I recommend doing this reverse outline. It's a really powerful tool, and it will be useful as you start to zero in towards a final draft. And so this is my favorite step. Revisit your thesis, find the core, and rewrite. Now, rewrite, that may be a little spooky to you. You're thinking, I just wrote it all. What do you mean rewrite? But rewriting is often, to me, much more exciting than writing your first draft, because maybe you're just going to write one sentence that will perfectly fit. And one sentence is approachable. You can think about it. You can make it work. So now that you've got this first draft and you've looked at it, maybe through doing a reverse outline, it's time to think about your thesis again. Is that really what this story is about, or has it changed a little bit? Maybe you've found like the real core of the story. So this is a good time to update your thesis, think about where your writing has led you. And it's also like, it's kind of like your last moment to say, oh no, I need to step away from this. I need to take it a different direction. So you got to check in. Are you happy about where you are? If you feel like, wow, this is starting to get there, great, you're on track. If you feel like, I don't know if I want to talk all about just the history of the tuba. Like, I stopped playing tuba after I was in 9th grade. Why did I think that was going to be my essay? That's good too. You found something out, and now, just zoom back, pick up another, maybe do a little more brainstorming, a little more exploratory writing, and come back to this stage. You definitely don't want to press forward with an essay that you're pretty sure is not your thing. If you're really sitting on the fence, this could also be a good time to start asking somebody for a little bit of advice. So this is also a time where you'll want to start thinking about this word limit. So if your essay is too long, and again, I hope that it is too long, then you start thinking about what's essential. Where is the heart? And oftentimes when we've written an essay with a couple of scenes and also some lengthy exposition in there, our first instinct will be to just kind of shrink everything, but that is rarely the right way to go. You don't want your essay to feel very rushed. Instead, you need to think about, like, what is essential? What is important here? What do I really need to include in this essay? And when you do that, it'll become much more obvious what you need to pare away, what you need to cut back, and maybe what you need to expand or talk a little bit more about. It's also just a great time to experiment with your essay. Save your old drafts. I've worked with students who every time they end up doing editing, they'll say, version 6. And I had one student where it was like version 31. And it was a great essay. He got into, I think he ended up going to Columbia. But I don't know if that was all due to the fact that he'd written 31 versions of his essay, but I don't think it hurt. And this is a great stage also to read it out loud, maybe to go off and read other essays. If you have one of those books of like other successful college essays, or if you have a book like I hope you do of like personal essays that are great. There's a great anthology edited by Philip Lopate called The Personal Essay. You could go read those, get inspiration, think about different things. This is just like the most exciting time. Everything is possible. At this moment, you could take it in any direction. However, then we go to the next step, which is revising for clarity and flow. And this is really when you start to zero in. You've got the order of how you're going to tell everything. You have your paragraphs. It's mostly written. Now you want to start reading it aloud. This will give you a different way of accessing the text. So definitely listen to think, oh, that sounds kind of boring. Like I'm just kind of rambling there. Or, oh, it seems like I just like totally shift into a different thing there. Like I sound like Wikipedia for a paragraph. Mark that, make a note. I think this sounds really bad. And then you can come back and work on that. You want to, if something is confusing, not clear, if you're describing something and if you think it would be kind of hard to see what I'm seeing, those are times to start really rewriting, changing things. And then as you're narrowing in, check the transitions between paragraphs. Does it make sense to jump from this paragraph suddenly to my childhood? Oftentimes it does, but you have to do it confidently. Or how is the logic flowing? You can look for words like but, or sometimes if you say this in the first sentence of a paragraph, that'll refer to something from the previous paragraph, and they start being tied together. And in this step, you also want to just be really careful if you're giving the wrong message. If you're writing about how you started a Black Lives Matter chapter at your high school, and then you go off on a long tangent about how you do understand how people do get sucked into the alt-right, and you do have sympathy, even though you didn't go that. You might think, do I really want to spend all this time talking about this? That's not the message I'm trying to get across at all here. So be really careful at this stage. Start really thinking about the impact that this will have on your readers. And then we're starting to get towards a finished essay that we can really stand behind. And this is, if you haven't before, this is a great time to bring in outside readers and editors. So it's good practice to share your draft with someone who knows you well and who you really trust as a writer, and also to share it with someone who doesn't know you very well. So this could be a teacher who you don't know. It could be an outside editor or tutor. It could be like a friend's parent who is good at writing. I don't stress about finding this person who doesn't know you very well, but do think, is the person responding to my essay, are they responding to it because they know me and they just think I'm great? Or are they giving it to me straight? Are they being really clear? And one of the ways that we can ask for feedback that cuts beyond the, well, I think you should change this word to this word, which can be really useful. But if you're trying to get a more holistic view of your essay, you can ask your readers to list 3 qualities that they think your essay demonstrates about you. And then you can think about that. Wow, I didn't think that this really showed that my leadership. Maybe that's something you want to develop. Or maybe they say, oh, it really showed the way that Jasper doesn't really actually care about school. I'd be like, oh, maybe I don't want that in my essay. I encourage you in this step to be really thoughtful about who you invite to leap into your creative process, to read along with you, to basically join you in your mind as you write this essay. Definitely don't let anyone pressure you into sharing your essay if you don't want to. This can happen often with best friends. Maybe they're a little overbearing. Doesn't mean they're not your friend, but you don't owe them letting them read your essay. And yeah, I've seen it where kids don't want their parents to read their essays. If you feel like you're writing something that is so intensely personal that you really don't want anyone around you to read your essay, do think about why you're wanting to send this to a bunch of very distant people. I think that might be a slight mistake or a warning sign. If somebody gives you an edit and you really don't agree with it, don't accept it. Okay, we've given it to outside readers and editors. Everybody said It's great. It's time to do some final revising and proofreading. So this is a step where we may feel like, oh my God, I've been writing this essay for a month. I am gonna lose my mind. Don't lose your mind, but do put it away. Don't think about it for a couple of days. It's amazing what fresh eyes can do for you. I've been writing a lot of fiction in the last couple of years, and I often will write a story, and then by the end of the story, I'm just so sick of it, and I'll put it away for months, sometimes a year. And when I take it back out, I always have all sorts of fresh insights. So you may not have a month to put it away, and that might be a foolish idea, but a few days is a great idea. Do more reverse outlining, more reading aloud, and keep working on it till you're really happy with it. You feel like in this, because it's a 650 word essay, I think you really want, I ideally encourage students to make every word count, to make every sentence be progressing the story or developing something. So you can be rigorous with your work. And proofreading is something that you neglect at your own peril. You can use a spell check. I know a lot of people just have spell check on all the time, making the squiggly lines underneath their writing. I would not rely on that. I would use spell check, but also read it closely, ask a friend or a parent to read it. Just look really closely to make sure there aren't any duplicated words. Try and keep double spaces out of it. You just add one space at the end of a sentence. This is something that will be looked at closely by these admissions committees. So you want it to look good. You want your mistakes to be maybe in the whole conception. You were too brave in taking on this subject or something that will show a virtue, whereas sloppiness is just never a good idea. So once you've done all that, you can submit it. I guess I'll go back. Once you've done all that, you can submit it. Congratulations, future you did it. And that's pretty much our whole presentation. If you need more help, Signet is here for you. You guys already know this. There's the blog, signeteducation.com/blog. There are the email lists that send you all sorts of good things. And I was informed yesterday when I talked to Signet that you guys will be receiving tomorrow, Friday, I think they said at noon, so I guess it's something that's kind of pre-scheduled, a guide that they've put together, which is Signet's Guide to Writing the College Admissions Essay. So that will be a PDF, I believe, that will be sent to you. Don't hold me totally to it, but I believe that that's true. And so there are many good resources out there. The guide, I believe that their guide doesn't have quite the same focus on exploratory writing that my presentation just did. So think about whether that's something you want to include in your process. And if you are finding that you're totally stuck, there are people like me working at Signet who would be totally happy to work with you along the way. Though I will say many students write their essays with limited help or help from parents, and those can be excellent too. It could be some of the best. But I think that, you know, I'm already working with several students this year, and so that can be a very useful service as well. So that concludes our essay. I managed to leave our essay, our presentation. I managed to leave 9 minutes in case anyone has a question, comment, follow-up, a concern. I'm going to turn off my screen sharing and yeah, do any of you, oh, I see that there are two questions in the chat here. So Dina Moran says, are these the actual Common Application essay questions? And the answer is yes. Those are the 2020, 2021 Common Application essay questions. And I'm gonna Okay, I'll switch over to Nabila now, or Nabila. I'm sorry if I'm mangling your name. Feel free to unmute yourself and I will say it correctly. You say, when you have multiple core ideas you'd like to incorporate into your essays, is it best to pick one and capitalize on it? Or should you try to incorporate all of them? So my answer to this question is, it's basically, you should probably pick one. I, in my own writing, tend to write very long essays in which I try to explore all the things that I want connected to a story. So you say you have multiple, or you might have multiple core ideas. So I would worry less about the ideas, and I would pick the story that is going to guide you. So if your story is about something that may touch on multiple ideas, I mean, say my brother, when he was in high school, helped start the Gay Straight Alliance at our high school, which we didn't have when I was there. And if I don't think he wrote about that, but if he had, I think he could have written about kind of the small-mindedness of the small town that we grew up in. And that might have been one idea. And then he might have also written about his own personal transformation, how he realized, you know, maybe something about his own sexuality, but also what it meant to be an ally. And he started to see how other people were more brave than him. So I think you can have multiple ideas in an essay, but let the story that you're telling guide you into your ideas. Okay, let me know if that was an okay answer, if that helped you. And I have one more question from Dina Moran. So it says, for an essay topic, are you better to stay away from personal disabilities? Does this reflect poorly on an application? That is a great question. So personal disabilities should not reflect poorly on anyone. They aren't something that we choose, and they're not, yeah, it's just wrong to discriminate on the basis of something that is not an expression of oneself, but is the very core of oneself. So that said, I recommend to students that they not speak about mental illness. Physical disabilities I don't have any reason to say don't. If that's a story that you want to tell, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that raises any flags with colleges. However, with mental illness, it is a fact that American colleges have an epidemic of depression and anxiety. And this is something that I experienced when I was in college, and I experienced those symptoms and those illnesses, but also I saw them in many of the students around me. It also is something that that I just know is out there, and so colleges are directing a lot of resources to try to address this, which I think is a very positive thing. That said, if somebody is presenting at the very start as somebody as having struggles with depression, that may, it shouldn't, but it may raise a red flag of them saying, do we really, we know that already 20 or 30% of our students are going to struggle with depression. Do we really want to admit somebody who is guaranteed to be in this way? And so that doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply to college if you have depression, obviously. And you also, I would encourage you to, seek the intervention of therapy and possible pharmaceutical things. This is a disease that we are able to treat in a lot of cases. I wish we could in more. But think about if there's something else that you can write about. I would just say cautiously, maybe not that, although there have been students who write about depression, about anxiety, about mental illness in incredibly moving ways that I'm sure have helped them get into colleges. So Is that a useful answer? I think I am going to bring this to an end unless, oh, you're very welcome, Dina. Yeah. Okay, so I am going to bring this presentation to an end. Thank you very much for being here. It's my pleasure to get to talk to you guys today. Thanks for spending an hour with me. So, all right, you guys have a good night too. Bye-bye.